Oh,
Look what Susie did.
oh,
Did I
wow.
send you the video? I did. I don't think I sent you the video.
No?
Susie had a small round ball of tinfoil that she
Awesome.
loves to play with. And she brought it up onto the sofa next to me. I was writing my story.
Mm.
She brought it up onto the sofa next to me and dropped it. So I picked it up and I threw it for her.
Yeah.
She fucking ran after it, picked it up and brought it back and dropped it. And I was
Oh,
playing fetch with her for ages.
oh, she's such a good girl.
Well, no,
And then
she's
what
not because
happened?
she did that. She scratched me.
Why did she do that? Because that's a pretty serious scratch by the looks
No,
of
it
it.
was a very small scratch, but my skin at the moment,
Uh, paper
I don't
skin.
have the ability to heal. So,
Oh. What was she trying
it
to get the ball or?
yeah. So basically, where she was dropping it in the sofa, it was going in between the cushions. So she was like, trying to stop it from going in,
Right.
and I also went, trying to stop it from going in because we was having such a lovely time together that
Yeah.
we crossed paths,
Mm.
and she got me. Ouch! Ouch! Ouch!
Ouchie, ouchie, ouchie.
Ouch! 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 It doesn't hurt at all because I'm obviously rock hard, but
Well,
it looks
obviously.
gnarly, and it only looks gnarly because my blood isn't clotting properly, so it
Mm.
doesn't really heal.
Maybe you'll become a werecat.
Maybe I'll start
Werecat.
bashing at the door and jumping on people's
Yeah.
backs.
When there's a full moon, we're here.
Meow.
Morning.
Morning.
That took you a while then, didn't it?
So, in last week's episode,
Well, 2 days ago.
in the last episode,
Yes.
I went through the story of Marina, who had been abandoned in the Colombian jungle and been taken in by a troop of little tiny capuchin monkeys.
Hmm. Is it a
And she,
troop of monkeys?
I don't know. What's the?
I
Is
need
it
to find
plural?
out because
Yeah, let's Google it quickly
this is a good game that we play with the kids.
with yourself.
Just me.
I don't know. It just sounded right. A troop of monkeys.
Playing with monkey.
A collective noun for monkeys. It will be a troop of monkeys.
Nice. That's what we
We can
wanted to know.
also use words such as a barrel, carload, or tribe in the place of troop. But it's a troop of monkeys. How about that?
Cart load.
Fart. What did you say? A fart load?
Cart load.
Oh, this is just a fart load of monkeys.
Right. Well, from now on, when we're talking about a group of monkeys, we will call a fart load.
A fart load of monkeys.
Right. So she was being raised by a fart load of monkeys.
Yeah, surrounded in the jungle by a fart load
Amazing.
of monkeys.
We'll just go from fart load. Fart.
So she then obviously had everything happen in the jungle, and we ended the episode with her leaving with the hunters, leaving her fart load of monkeys behind,
Leading the farts of monkeys in the jungle. Yep.
and leaving the jungle. So this second part is about what happens after jungle life. Some of what happens after jungle life, because there is going to be a third part.
So this is part jungle, post jungle.
Post jungle, yep. There's no jungle in here.
Post fart.
Yeah. Why is it so funny?
I don't know. It's very mature.
Very much so. So Marina followed the two hunters through the jungle, and like I say, she didn't have any thoughts about returning back, or if she just, this was her decision that she'd made. So the man just seemed absolutely furious that he had this strange being with them now, and he
Mm.
kept shouting at her, and he kept stopping to pulling her arm and pulling her up onto her 2 feet, and
Oh.
trying to get her to walk with them on her 2 feet. But she said it was just so unnatural to her that
Mm.
as soon as his back was turned and he carried on walking, she just automatically dropped back down onto all fours and walk normally. Well, normally for her.
Yeah. Well,
She said
she would have had more of her life probably on all
walking as a
fours.
monkey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rather than walking as a human.
Uh-huh. And everything would have formed differently. Her
Mm.
muscles wouldn't maybe be quite as elongated
Mm.
as out walking on 2 legs. And she's at a time in her life where she would have been developing. So
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
um but she said walking on 2 feet made her feel vulnerable because she was so open. So she was stood
Yeah.
upright, and she was so open. So naturally, when she was on all fours, she was a lot more closed in, and she felt safer. She felt more protected.
Mm.
Um. So, and she said also she couldn't balance properly. She couldn't walk on
Mm.
her 2 feet, and she likened it. And she said, it was as if someone had asked us to go in the jungle and walk on all fours.
Yeah.
That's how difficult it was for her. It just wasn't natural. It was just so natural for her to walk on all fours.
Mm.
So they walked for longer than Marina had ever walked for. She'd been venturing out of the jungle and going for these long distances, but she'd never ventured this far away from a monkey home before. This was the furthest she'd ever been. She said the sounds were different, and it made her uncomfortable. She'd said that her hearing had become sort of her most attuned sense,
Mm.
and that it had almost become like a map, so that anywhere she was in the jungle, she could kind of tell where she was based on the sounds. So she always knew where she kind of got her bearings from listening to the
Mm.
sounds of the jungle. And all of these new sounds that she was hearing, it made her feel very lost. She felt like she didn't know where she was. And it was just very uncomfortable for her. The plants were different, the trees were different, the floor wasn't as soft and spongy, and so it was just all very sort of strange, alien to her to be in this sort of part of the jungle.
Mm.
And she was hungry and she was thirsty. 'Cause she'd been walking for so long, and the hunters, she said, had been sort of having a drink from their hip flask. Obviously, she didn't know it was a hip flask, but
Yeah.
they at no point ever offered her a drink or anything like that, or offered to stop.
They sound
Um,
lovely.
they're great people. But again, at no point did she think about turning back and going back to the monkeys. This was her
Yeah.
decision that she'd made, and that was it. This was her new route. So after traipsing for hours through the dense jungle, the sun had started to set, and they had kind of all of a sudden burst out of the jungle onto this like dirt track.
Mm.
And she said they kind of had to sort of where this dirt track was, there was nothing over the other side. They were kind of like on a cliff, I
Right.
would imagine.
Yeah.
And they had to walk down this dirt track, down the side of this mountain. And then when they followed this track, there was a truck sitting there. And again, this brought back this dormant memory for
Mm.
her of when she was kidnapped, and the fear that she'd had of being in that truck. So she kind of thought it was fitting. She had arrived in a truck, and now she
Yeah.
would be leaving in a truck as well. So she was just roughly shoved into the back of this truck by these hunters, where she was just crammed in the back with all of these cages and sacks of all different animals, different
Mm.
wildlife, um, birds of all different colours, some that she'd recognised from being in the jungle and some that she didn't. There were butterflies as well, all different colored butterflies, lizards, and even a small monkey. She said it wasn't like her monkeys, but she still had this connection to it. She still felt drawn to it. So she curled up into a cage of her own opposite the monkey, which we would find very strange. Why would you go in a cage? But she was
Mm.
feral. She thought of herself as an animal, I guess.
Yeah, and that's where they all are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where they were. So she went into this cage opposite the monkey, and this monkey was making all sorts of noises, and it was
Mm.
howling and it was hooting, and she sort of tried to communicate with it in her monkey language, but she said the noises that it was making were different. They were,
Unfamiliar to her.
yeah, unfamiliar. So she couldn't communicate with it. So she just put her hand through the bars and kind of held on to his paw.
Mm.
And the journey in the truck was atrocious. It was boiling hot and it was stuffy. And you can imagine all the animals as well in that heat and the odor that they gave off, plus all of the animal poop and the pee, and including her own. She had nowhere
Yeah.
to defecate, so she also went where she was in her cage.
Made party.
Yep.
Mm.
And she so it was rank in there. The journey was long.
I was
She had
just about to say, was it a long journey if like they
such
were all using the toilet and
yep. Such a long journey. She's obviously no sense of time at all, but she knew it was long. They
Yeah.
had stopped for the hunters to like fill up, put more petrol in, and then go to the toilets and whatever else. They'd stopped a few times and things, but they didn't let her out or check on the animals or anything. So she knew they was in there for a really long time. So long so that the monkey in the cage opposite died.
No,
Yeah. Which is probably maybe from terror, from fright, from heat. But shocking. So when the truck eventually stopped at its final destination, the cages were unloaded and Marina's was left until last. And she was absolutely terrified of what lay outside of the truck. There was different faces that sort of peering in at her, and they were all loud. She said that she remembers being completely overwhelmed just by the sound. There was too much sound and it overwhelmed her senses. And they were all saying things that she couldn't understand, and she felt like a trapped animal. So when hands started to reach into the truck to grab her, she done what any animal would do, and she snarled at them and she sort of bared her teeth and she tried to bite them and scratch them, but obviously they were no match for her at all, and they just grabbed her. She was tiny and she was fatigued, she was dehydrated, so they just sort of pulled her out by her legs. So she was just dragged out of the truck into her new surroundings, and she
must have been
was
terrified.
yeah. I I kept trying to sort of put myself in her shoes. And I just can't. But she said once she was out of the truck, she was immediately overwhelmed by the sights and the sounds and the smells, new sounds that she hadn't heard before, the beeps and like toots of the different cars, new sights that she was seeing. There were different structures and buildings, and she had no idea what any of them were for, or what their purpose was, and all of these smells and things that she'd never encountered before. The ground under her feet was cold and it was hard, and that was all strange for her. Like I said, everything on her senses was just too much for her. And the male hunter that she'd been with was sort of grabbing her by the wrist and sort of half dragged her and half walked her to the entrance of a nearby building. Once inside this building, she was just shocked by everything that she saw. She had no concept of furniture. She had like curtains, rugs, anything normal that you would find in a building. She just, everything was alien to her. Did no idea what any of it was, what its
Yeah.
purpose was, or anything. And she was terrified. So from her time in the jungle, she just had two basic instincts. And one was to find food, and the other one was survival. And she was completely in survival mode at the moment, and she was like looking around for any way that she could escape, sort of pulling at her arm, just trying to do anything that she could to escape the situation. But she was tiny. She was probably around 9 or 10 at the time, and she was really, really small. So that the big hunter man just held on to her with no
Yeah.
issues at all. So a woman came into this room to greet them, and unlike the two other women that she'd seen, the that she'd been like instinctively drawn to, which was the woman in the jungle with the baby, who she
Hmm.
felt this really caring sense of, and then the hunter that came into the jungle as well. This woman did not look kind or nurturing, and she didn't get this same feeling from her that she had from the other two. This wasn't a place where she felt safe, that she felt
Yeah.
like she was going to be cared for. And she would soon find out that the place that the hunters had brought her to was a brothel.
Oh, great.
She had been traded for, she said that it looked like they handed over some leaves, but obviously it was money. She later
Right.
learned that that's what it was, but she thought, what are they doing? They just passed her some leaves, and then he passed her to the woman. So,
Yeah.
but she'd been
Oh,
traded in to a brothel.
brilliant.
So Marina's first day at the brothel, as you can well imagine, was traumatic. I mean, her whole time at the brothel was traumatic, but this
Yeah.
first day, the whole concept of any form of societal norms, language, their way of life was just alien to her. And
Mm.
she wasn't welcomed, and she wasn't accepted, and she wasn't understood.
Oh, that's horrible.
She was thought of as stupid. And there were two words that she would hear very often and would quickly pick them up. One was estupido,
Oh,
which meant stupid,
yep.
and the other was Gloria. So she would come to
Gloria.
learn that that was the name that they had given to her. They had given her this name, Gloria. Um, I will obviously continue to refer to her as Marina because we will get incredibly confused otherwise.
Yeah.
But the name, well, during her time in the brothel, they had given her the name Gloria. So upon arriving at the brothel, Marina was taken by some young girls into a room with a large metal container. She had no idea what it was for. The only thing that she could liken it to was from her time in the jungle when she used to watch the Indians cooking their food, and they would put their food in water to cook it.
Oh,
So she was immediately terrified when they started filling this metal container with water. She thought that they was going to eat her, that they was going to cook her, and that they was going
oh,
to eat her, because that was the only reference that she had.
yeah.
So she naturally resisted any attempt of getting her into this
Yep.
water. So
Yeah, and obviously she can't communicate that either, can she? She can't say, "Listen,
no,
are you going to eat me?"
yeah. So it was as if it was you're trying to get a monkey into a bath.
Yeah.
Like she was squawking and making all these strange noises, all these distress calls
Mm.
that she would have done in the wild, or she'd seen the monkeys do in the wild when there was a threat or there was any danger,
Mm.
and all of these distress calls and things. So she, like I say, she was resisting any attempt of getting in that water. So reinforcements were called, and it actually took around 5 of these young girls to get her into this container of water.
Oh.
And I think I said in the previous episode that she was incredibly small, and
Mm.
she was really skinny, And she still is. She's 4'9",
Yeah,
and
that's tiny,
she's
isn't it?
yeah, and she was just really small. But her time in the jungle climbing trees had made her nimble and
Mm,
quite strong and
wrong.
agile. And she'd seen scraps and fights in the jungle between the monkeys and the
Mm,
different monkeys that were coming in to try and take territory and things like that. So she knew what to do to defend herself.
yeah.
Um, but that her defense obviously wasn't any match for the five
Mm,
much bigger people.
mm.
So eventually she was dunked into this bath and she was washed and scrubbed. And she said that she'd been so shocked to see that underneath the black, her skin was actually a different color.
Oh,
She'd been so used to seeing her,
yeah.
the black on her skin that she didn't know that it wasn't that color. She'd never bathed in the jungle. She had a fear of water, and she'd witnessed a lot of open bodies of water, and she knew that the animals that dwelled there, like she often said about the caimans and
Mm,
things that would get anything that went into these open bodies of water. So she never went near them. So she never bathed.
mm.
So the only time she ever really got wet was when it rained.
Yeah. And you said she had a fear of water before that anyway.
Yeah, yeah,
When the
yeah.
grandpa,
Granddad monkey.
yeah, monkey took her over to push her head under the water to make her sick.
Yeah. So she'd always had this fear
Yeah.
of water. So just didn't, she didn't need to smell particularly nice. So she didn't.
Yeah.
So the water was black within minutes, and the girls had to get her out, empty the bath out, fill it again.
Mm.
But once Marina was out, she would not let them get her back in. She had been so terrified that she was like a thing
Oh,
possessed. So what the girls did instead was they hand washed her with this like scrubby scrub thing,
scrubby
um,
scrub.
scrubby scrub thing, and she said it made her skin red raw because they
Yeah, I
were
bet.
scrubbing so hard.
Mm.
And she was given clothes to put on, which she had no idea what they were, and she couldn't handle
Mm.
it at first. She didn't like the material against her skin.
No.
It was strange. Everything made her too hot. Anything that she put on made her too hot. So she was always trying to tear off these clothes. And she didn't know what shoes were.
Mm.
She'd arrived in the jungle barefoot. So
Yeah.
she didn't know what shoes were or how they worked, and she couldn't walk in them. So she was always kicking them off. So the girls actually just kind of went, "All right, don't wear your shoes." So she was very often barefoot. But what she was concerned about the most was her hair. Her hair was incredibly matted.
Mm.
And it fell down. It went if she was sort of stood upright, it fell down to about her knees,
Wow.
really long. And she said, although it used to get in her way and drag on the floor and things, she felt protected by it. It was almost
Mm.
like a curtain that
Yeah.
she could hide behind. In years to come, during the writing of this book, her and her daughters would work out her length of time in the jungle based on how long her hair was
Right.
and how quickly. So they did all these tests of like how quickly her hair grew,
Mm.
and like its rate of growth. And she then tested her daughters to see if maybe hers slowed down as she got older. So she tested her daughter's rate of growth and did like an average rate of
Mm.
growth. And so they estimated based on all of these things that she was in the jungle anywhere between 4 and 6 years.
Wow.
So it could be less, it could be longer, but that's the best length of time that they can
And at
sort of
that age as
ascertain.
well,
Hmm.
it's like we were saying before, she would have had more of her life in the jungle as a monkey
Hmm.
than she would have done before.
Yeah. Yeah. So she knew that by the time she'd got to the brothel, she was probably around 9 or 10. Just like I
Right.
say, she knew going into the jungle, she wasn't 5. She was nearly 5,
Mm.
but she wasn't 5. So she was probably around 9 or 10 when she came out of the jungle.
Oh, I thought it was okay to just sell her to a brothel. 10-year-old
Yeah.
child.
Well, in
It's
Colombia,
horrible.
like I say, in the 50s, child trafficking was incredibly prevalent.
Mm,
So that I guess that they just wanted to make some money. They didn't have
yeah.
they didn't feel in towards this child, so they sold her.
Oh, it's disgusting.
He is. There's also a bit in this brothel about the when the girls in the brothel became pregnant, they would sell their babies.
Oh God.
So it just gives you a picture of what it was like then. But Marina said in her book that had she have recognized what the instrument was in one of the girls' hands, she would never have allowed what was about to happen. So had she known what this thing was,
Oh
she
no.
would never have stood still. But one of the girls took a pair of scissors and cut the majority of Marina's hair,
Mm.
leaving it so that it was kind of around her ears. So it was like this almost like her cloak had been
Yeah,
taken
so
away from her.
safety, isn't
This
it?
this sense of safety. She kind of felt incredibly vulnerable and naked, although she was always naked. She
Yeah,
felt naked
yeah, yeah, because it's
without
like
that.
exposing you, isn't it? It's
Hmm.
like me without my hat.
Yeah.
If I haven't got my fuzzy ears, this is my security.
Yeah.
If
So
someone
you
cut
know
these off,
so you know what she's been
I
through.
know exactly what she's been through.
So once the ordeal was over, she was just kind of expected to know what to do. So simple things that the other girls did, like sitting at the tables to eat their meals,
Mm,
she couldn't do. She didn't know why they did it. Where sleeping on a bed, she didn't understand what that was. Like for a
no.
little while when she was first at the brothel, she just kind of slept on a mat on the floor. They just gave her this mat and let her sleep on this mat on the floor. But eventually she would be given a bed. And she thought that she had to sleep under the base of the bed because it made sense to her that the base of the bed was like a canopy, like
Yeah.
a protection. So she thought she had to sleep under it,
Mm,
and that's what kept her safe, I guess.
yeah.
Um, it's funny, isn't it? How you kind of take for granted that you know what objects are, but if you didn't know what a bed was,
Yeah.
you wouldn't know where to
No. I
sleep, I
mean,
guess.
we know what our things are and what we're supposed to do with them and how we're supposed to use them because they've always been in our lives. You know,
Hmm.
well, so for most of us, I won't say for everyone, we've grown up being put in a bed at night and we go to sleep and we get tucked in and we sit at the table and we have our dinner or our breakfast or whatever it might be, but that's what we're used to because that's what we've been told. But it's interesting, sorry, it's perplexing
Hmm.
to think of a life where you wouldn't have been shown those things. And actually, I was thinking of something the other day, just quickly, I'd quite like to get your thought on it, which is a similar kind of thing. I wonder what would happen if you put a a male baby and a female baby and you put them a bit like sort of the Truman Show kind of thing, that no outside interference, and you just let those two grow up, whether they would what instincts would they come out with?
But there's
Would they naturally at some point be drawn to each other to the point where they would feel the need to
mate.
have sex? Yeah,
They would,
exactly.
because that's a basic human instinct to mate and to reproduce. That's a basic human instinct.
Mm,
And there is actually a really famous study, and I don't know what it's called, but it was based on boys and girls and the influences that people have on them, and
mm,
why boys go for boys things and girls goes for girls things.
mm,
So they did this study based on the boy babies and the girls babies and like a room full of toys, Naturally, the boys would grow up gravitating towards boys' toys.
Right.
And girls would naturally grow up
Well,
gravitating
with
towards.
no outside influence at all.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember the study. I'll
Hmm.
have to look it up and mention it next time. But it's something like that, and they have done a study
That would be
like that.
interesting to do, because I'm really
Yeah.
curious about those sort of things, because obviously, and what does it come down to? Like, obviously,
Well, it's like nature versus nurture, isn't it? That whole
yeah,
psychological debate, nature versus nurture.
I'm not drawn towards stereotypically girly things, and I never have been.
Hmm.
And
Neither am I, but
I'm,
my mum used to dress me in frilly pink dresses.
oh yeah, I mean, I was dressed in
Yeah.
dresses, and my mum used to curl my hair, and
Yeah.
things. So I get that, but I've always been. I didn't really have like a lot of dolls and things like that when I was little. I had more
Dirt
like,
bikes.
yeah, I had
Army men.
yeah, I had He-Men figures, Star Wars I used to play with, skateboards,
Hmm.
BMXs,
Oh God, I loved my BMX.
always had an old potato in my pocket for my spud gun.
Spud gun.
Always that. And I've always been like that all the way through. And I'm still like it now. I love a truck. I love a motorbike, and I'm not saying that these are boys' things, but
Yeah.
stereotyping it, I I tend to go for boys' toys more
Mhm.
than I do girls' toys. I'm in a same-sex relationship. So is there any connection between that? I think we should look into it.
Should do
That's
our
all
own
I'm saying.
experiment.
Do it. Yeah, just
Okay.
do it.
Um,
I don't know where you
there's a
are.
bit in this story actually where she kind of goes towards girly things. Like she looks at the other girls that they're in the brothel, and she also wants to be beautiful and she wants to be pretty and things like
Yeah.
that. And so she had no outside influence sort of growing up in the jungle. So
Yeah,
I
but do you
don't know.
think that's a like trying to fit in thing?
I don't know.
We
I'm just
definitely got
here
to
to
look into this.
just here to tell the
Just
story.
here to be a storyteller, for God's sake.
Don't know these
Asking me all
things.
these questions. Shut up.
Sorry. You need a different podcast host for more intellectual matters.
Or what? No, if you meant me, stop asking all these weird questions.
No, no, no. If you
Yeah.
want the weird questions answered intellectually, you have to find yourself someone else because
I don't want or expect anything intellectual from you.
no, you don't expect anything. Thank you.
You always meet my expectations, so I'm
Oh,
good.
show your face. It's because they're low. Keep your expectations low. Anyways, so during her time at the brothel, Marina was put straight into servitude.
Oh.
She was to learn and to learn quickly. The owner of the brothel, a woman by the name Anna Carmen, the
You're going to
woman
say anaconda.
my anaconda don't
Ana-
want none unless you got balls, huh? No, Anna Carmen. So this was
Anaconda.
the woman that she'd first met, and this woman that she'd felt this like evil intention from this woman. So
Because she's an anaconda.
she's an anaconda, which I'm sure Marina would have probably come across in the jungle
Yeah.
at some point.
Mhm.
She did also say in the book that she learned that snakes were incredibly friendly.
I bet they were.
Yeah,
But they
really
were like,
friendly.
you stink, you're all right.
Yeah, you're too big to eat. Yeah, she learned that they were really friendly. But anyways, so Anna Carmen wasted no time in punishing Marina at any given opportunity. And she would beat her with a wooden spoon, and she would whip her
Nice.
with like an electrical cord, and she would hit her with
Oh,
just about anything and for anything. Marina said she could do no right. Everything in the human world made no sense to her. She would be beaten for eating with her hands. She couldn't use cutlery. She didn't have necessarily the dexterity
mm.
cutlery. She'd never had such like fine motor skills, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, she was beaten as well, like an animal, for defecating outside in the garden because she had no concept of what a toilet was.
Well, yeah.
She didn't know what a toilet was. It was alien to her.
Yeah.
And she couldn't cook, and she couldn't clean, and she couldn't communicate. And there's a bit in the book actually that it kind of made me smile when I read it, and I'm going to read it out to you because it's just the innocence of it. I don't know, it just kind of like warmed my heart a little bit. So I'm going to read it to you. And it says, "My domesticated ineptitude knew no bounds. I had no memory of simple things like plates. Esfragile was a word that had no meaning to me until the point when a wet plate slid from my clumsy wet fingers and exploded into a million pieces across the floor. Why had it done that? How had it done that? I didn't associate the crash sound with anything being wrong. I just looked at the pieces on the floor, trying to understand it, because I'd never
Oh,
seen a texture like it before.
that's so weird, isn't it?
I, all the time while I was reading this book, I tried to really get myself into how she would be feeling,
Yeah.
and coming out of this jungle and not knowing what all of these things were, because if you hear a crash in a restaurant, you go, "Oh, someone's dropped something."
Yeah. Everyone
She
goes,
didn't,
way.
way. She didn't associate that sound with, "Oh shit,
Well,
I've dropped a..."
yeah. Or nothing. That would have
No,
been a completely unfamiliar
she just looked at this
sound.
once whole thing that she'd had that now wasn't whole and was like, "What the shit's happened here?" What on earth? It
Oh,
just
that's
really
so
made
sweet.
me, yeah. And so she said things like the temperature baffled her,
Mm.
like that things could be boiling hot, but also
Mm.
freezing cold. And she said that she was given an ice lolly once, and she said it was so cold that it hurt her tongue, and that
Oh,
because it had stuck to her tongue, she thought it was alive, so she threw it across the room. And she was scared this thing had attached itself to her. So she naturally just was like, "What the hell is
that's
this?" and
so
threw it across
weird.
the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a strange,
That's so weird, isn't it?
yeah, really, really. So it was really very interesting to read this side of things, that like
Mm.
to be domesticated, and for
Yeah.
her to experience all of these things. She wouldn't know what absolutely anything was.
No. Even
A door. She had
yeah,
no idea
I'm
how to
just
work a
about to
door
say that.
handle.
Yeah, door hand.
Yeah.
You'd be like, I'm trapped. And someone would
Yeah.
be like, well,
How
it's
do I get
unlocked. Why
out?
didn't you just go out? And
Just
it's
open the
like,
door.
how would you even know what a door handle is? And
Yeah.
God, that's so weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Like glass panels. She would walk into a glass panel because she didn't know that it was glass
Yeah.
panel.
I
Just thought
mean,
that
I
was the
know people that
outside.
do that.
Yeah,
So
that has happened to a few people.
yeah,
But the yeah, just the concept of absolutely everything was
that's crazy.
beguiling to her. She just had no
Beguiling.
beguiling. She had no idea. But Marina learned fast, and she had to, because she was regularly beaten for doing
Ugh.
all of these things wrong. They just had no tolerance and no patience for
I mean,
her.
they don't sound like great people, do they?
Not in the brothel, no. It's not where you
Plebs.
go to find nice people.
No.
Um, so she would soon begin to learn language and sort of picking up words here and there. And she would soon be able to sort of start communicating. And she was allowed out of the brothel and onto the streets to purchase goods from the market stalls and
Mm.
things. So she got sort of familiar with money, and she began to get a sense of the outside world, and how everything worked. But she also got very bored. She hated the house, just the fact that there was four walls, that
Mm.
she was kind of trapped inside. She'd had the whole jungle before, so she felt like a slave, like a prisoner. And people were always expecting something from her. She always had to do something, and she needed something to occupy her mind. Like I said in the previous episode, during her time in the jungle, she always wanted to learn more, and she was always actively challenging herself to do these things. So she soon found that something that she enjoyed doing was being mischievous.
Like a
So,
little monkey.
like a little monkey. And she started getting into trouble, and she started playing pranks on people, and she would sort of climb the tree in the garden and throw things at passers-by, and
Like feces.
just yeah, just like a little monkey. And she would obviously get beatings for it, and anytime there was something happened, they would blame her for being mischievous, and she was always end up getting a beating for it. And she remembers one time that there was a man that used to visit the brothel quite often, and he was always kind of put near her where she slept, and he would snore really, really loudly. So loudly that Marina couldn't sleep. So she decided one time to get some ice cold water and throw it over the man, and then run back to her bed and pretend like nothing had happened.
Uh-oh.
But she was obviously caught and
Yeah.
punished for doing so. And she also found that she enjoyed stealing like a little monkey.
Like a little monkey.
So when out in the town, she would steal from the vendors, and because she went down there and she would sort of buy goods and things, it weren't like she was a street child or anything like that. People generally wouldn't have thought that she was stealing, but she found out that she was actually incredibly good at it. She was very good at stealing, and in the jungle, food was something that was stolen a lot between the monkeys. And so it was kind of like a connection that it felt good to
familiar
her.
behavior.
It was familiar, so it kind of helped her to feel a bit more like herself, like a little monkey self. So although she had gotten to grips with communicating, she, for the most part, was ignored by the people at the brothel unless she was being told what to do or something. And she still preferred animals, and she still preferred being outside. So she would go outside, sames. She would go outside and she would climb the trees in the garden. She would sit in them and she would watch the wildlife. And the brothel had a goat, and she would spend plenty, like loads of time outside with the goat. She just felt much.
Was it a goat with goat eyes?
Goat eyes. She just felt much safer with animals than she did with people. So inside the brothel, strange men were always appearing. They were always coming and going, and they would stay in a room with some of the girls and then they would leave. And she found this really strange behavior, and some of the girls would start getting bigger, and then they would leave for a period of time, and then they would come back. And they're also confused. Marina, she didn't understand what was happening. And one day, a rich Colombian man had turned up at the brothel, and he had this really fancy, like, convertible car. And Marina said that it was something she'd never seen something so beautiful. And there was this really big fuss with all of the girls, and each girl wanted to be the one chosen to go with this man because he had loads of money and he had this nice car and whatever else. And Marina knew that she didn't stand a chance of being chosen to go with this man. She still wasn't particularly domesticated or anything. So she decided that what she would do was sneak into the like footwell of the car, because she's a sneaky little monkey. And she was tiny, so she went into this little footwell bit of the car and she covered herself over with something, and she waited there patiently. And eventually two girls were chosen to go with this man, and they sat on the boot of the car with their feet kind of on the seats because it was open topped. So you could go back to like the 50s and 60s. People used to do that all the time, didn't they? Used to sit on the
Oh,
back of the car.
I remember it well.
You
Yeah.
remember it well. um, so the man sped off super fast, and he was showing off his car, obviously. And Marina guessed that he had been drinking because she was now familiar with the smell of alcohol. It was
Oh.
always around in the brothel, and she could smell it in the car. So she thought that he'd been drinking. So they'd been driving for a little while, and the girls in the back were screaming with delight, and they were super happy, and they felt, I guess, really proud to be in this convertible with this rich man. And so she decided to sneak a little peek out from under her hiding place so she could see like all of the sights whizzing past. And in that tiny little footwell that she was wedged in, she felt freer than she had since she'd left the jungle. She was now outside in this big world, and with all of these, like, she could see like mountains and
Mm.
things whizzing past, and she just kind of felt free.
Mm.
And the next thing that she knew was that the car was like spinning,
Oh no.
spinning uncontrollably, and it was skidding, and the girls in the back were screaming. And then all of a sudden, the car was airborne,
Oh God.
and it was falling,
Oh
and they'd actually skidded off of the side of a mountain.
my God.
Before Marina could even contemplate what was happening, the falling car was immediately halted, and she watched the girls fly completely out of the car.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and then her head, like, there was this blinding pain in her head.
Oh, you said her head. I thought you said, and then a head. I was going to go, oh my God, went flying past.
No, well, she said that the driver of the car, he was kind of hanging out the front. Oops. He
Oops.
was like hanging out the front, and I'm gesticulating so much of the
No,
hitting.
it's making me
Hitting the
uncomfortable,
microphone.
this bit.
And he was like an absolute bloody mess, and she said she knew that he was dead.
Oh
But then
God.
she hit her head and she passed out. So Marina woke up several days later in the hospital to nurses saying how incredibly lucky she was, and that she was the sole survivor of that accident. And they
Jeez.
said that after the car had fallen off of the cliff, it hit a tree. So there's like a tree sticking out the side of the mountain,
Yeah.
and it had hit that tree. So all of the passengers, well, apart from the driver, he was like pinned. The
Yeah.
passengers, the girls had been thrown to their deaths. And Marina, because she'd been wedged in a little hidey hole underneath in this footwell, she had remained relatively injury
Yeah.
free, minus the bang to the head and some
Yeah.
bruises and things like that. So she's a lucky, lucky girl.
He's a lucky, lucky monkey.
Lucky monkey. So while in the hospital, although she could communicate sort of mildly, she didn't really speak in full sentences. She knew words, and she had like a quite thick speech, like almost like a speech impediment, really, where it just kind of wasn't very clear. And the police officers were obviously looking to identify her. Asking, well, what is her name? Where's her family? Where does she live? The only thing that she could tell them was that her name was Gloria. And they was like, well, what's your surname? But she didn't have one.
She was probably like, what's the surname?
What's the surname? Yeah. What
Yeah.
do you mean? What else is my name? That's my name.
Yeah.
So that obviously meant nothing to the police officers. But she would eventually be able to she did a big stutter there. She would eventually be able. She would eventually be able to tell them Anna Carmen's name, which led Marina to being taken back to the brothel when she was well enough to leave the hospital.
The police didn't take her back to the brothel, surely.
The police took her back to the brothel, and Anna Carmen opened the door, and the police said to her, "Is this your daughter?" And Anna Carmen said something like, "This animal, this filthy animal, you think is my daughter? Absolutely not." And she like hit her around the head and dragged her in, but the police didn't do anything at all.
Oh,
They was
brilliant.
like, well, another child brought back to her family. Great job.
Great job done.
Back at the brothel, Anna Carmen was absolutely infuriated to hear that 2 of her workers had been killed and that Marina hadn't. And she blamed Marina for the accident. And her anger and aggression towards her just went up a notch to the point that she had, at some point, her and Marina were alone in the brothel one day. And Anna Carmen was intent upon killing her. She tied Marina to a pole, and Marina said she was like a crazy thing, and she went to get a knife, and she was like really, really angry, and she was like this thing possessed. And she was trying to stab Marina. And she was sort of saying to me, no one knows that you're here. No one cares about you. If I was to kill you, no one would come looking for you. And she knew that was right. So she was so terrified that she wet herself. And then she was kind of kept slipping around in her urine, which obviously enraged Anna Carmen even more.
Can we just call her Anaconda?
You can.
Okay.
Every time I say Anna Carmen, I can see you doing a little smile. So she was only spared when Anna Carmen was interrupted by a man coming into the brothel. The same man that Marina had once thrown ice cold water over.
Oh, the snorer.
The snorer. So he actually calmed Anna Carmen down and untied Marina. But as he untied her, he hit her with the ropes, beat her for urinating on the floor, yet screaming at her to clear it up. And Marina said she was like this trembly, shaky thing. She couldn't quite clear it up properly because she was so like shaky and shaken up by it. But she said she was sure that he had only saved her for Anna Carmen's sake and not her own. So once again, she had narrowly avoided death. Since leaving the jungle, she had felt so isolated and so unloved and so uncared for that she desperately wanted to go back to the jungle because although it had its dangers, she had felt safe there, much safer than what she did with people. She did not trust a single person. But her ventures out into the town, whether it was for stealing or purchasing things, it had kind of made her somewhat social. So while most people shunned her for acting differently and for walking strangely, she didn't walk, but she still doesn't walk properly. If you watch her, she's got this strange walk. Yeah. There's
is it
a
like
video
what you just did, like that?
A little, it kind of is. It kind of is like a shuffly little walk that she does. It's not like a stride. Like it's a strange walk. And there's a video of her climbing a tree, and she's like in her 60s now, and she fucking bolts up this tree. She's like climbs and doesn't just climb up the tree like, oh, there's a lower branch here, I'll get on that, and there's a branch here and I'll get on that. She climbs right up the tree to the very top. Even on the branches that you'd think, geez, they're not going to support anybody's weight. Right up into the top of this tree she does. It's crazy. She had this strange kind of walk to her. So people shunned her for being different. But one woman in the town had taken a liking to her, and she would often sit and talk to Marina and give her a big friendly smile, and Marina kind of felt that caring nature from her, and she kind of trusted her a bit more than what she did everybody else.
But intuition, isn't it? It's like your gut feeling.
You get a sense, you can pick up on people's energies, can't you? So she trusted this woman a little bit more. But one day she called Marina to her, and she would sit Marina down, and she tried to explain to Marina what a brothel was and what the men that frequented there would expect from her. Marina obviously had no idea what she was talking about. So the woman pulled out a sausage from her basket of shopping and she told Marina that the men that came to Anna Carmen's house would turn her into a piece of meat. That was kind of how she described it to Marina. She told her that Anna Carmen was training her to be the right sort of meat for these men.
I'm not
And
going to lie, that's not where I thought you were going with the whole
No, I
sausage
know.
thing.
I know.
You reeled me in on that one.
I don't think it was a little sausage. I think it was like one of those giant, like a salami type thing. So yeah, she told Marina that Anna Carmen was training her to be the right sort of meat for these men and to not trust her and to run away and to leave there.
Good.
But Marina didn't understand. She didn't know why these men would want to turn her into a sausage. And she said that she couldn't run away. Where would she go? She didn't have anywhere to go. So Marina would return back to the brothel. She didn't know what the woman down at the market
sausage.
the sausage. She had that warning in the back of her mind, but she didn't know when she was going to need it. So life at the brothel was shit shit for her, and she would often think back about her monkeys and leaving them there. And Anna Carmen was just awful to her. There was at one point during her time there that she enlisted the help of exorcists because she thought that Marina was possessed.
Oh, for God's sake.
So these two like nuns or priests or something came in and
two nuns
and
a priest and an anaconda.
It's the start of a joke.
Yeah.
And they performed this exorcist. Obviously she had no idea what he was. It was only
exorcism, not exorcist. They performed the exorcist.
I don't know words.
Power of Christ compels you. Yeah.
So anyways, they performed this exorcism on her, but she had no idea what it was, and obviously it didn't help because she wasn't possessed. But after what Marina estimates was about a year of being in the brothel, she was doing her usual chores when a man came in. And Marina remembers that he was carrying a penknife, like a pocket knife, and he was sort of playing with it between his fingers and throwing it from one hand to the other and just quite, menacingly with this penknife. And he spoke to Anna Carmen, and Marina heard him ask for her youngest.
Oh, God.
And then saw both of their heads turn in her direction. And she immediately, like I say, this instinct, she immediately felt the intentions. She felt these evil intentions, and she instinctively knew that it was to be her turn, that this man was going to make her into a piece of meat. Yep. So in her panic, she ran into one of the nearby bedrooms and hid under the bed. And she just didn't know what to do, so she just waited there. And then she could hear Anna Carmen telling this man that if he offered her some crisps, that she would go with him in his car because she loved crisps, and that's fair enough, if somebody offered me
I
crisps.
understand that. Yeah, I'd pretty much go anywhere for crisps.
So she heard the two go off into the kitchen, presumably to get some crisps. And she knew that was her chance, and she had to escape. Like she instinctively knew about leaving the jungle. That was her chance to show herself and then leave the jungle. She knew that this was her chance to escape. So she slid out from underneath the bed that she'd been hiding, and she ran barefoot as fast as she could towards the open doorway and towards the crime-ridden streets of Colombia.
Oh, God.
And that is where I'm going to end
No.
part 2.
Yuck.
And part 3 will be about what comes next in Marina's life on the streets of Colombia. And
I'm so into this story.
oh, you're gonna have
It's
to
really
wait.
good. Well, I can't. I've got a whole weekend and I've got work and all sorts, and I'm not going to hear the next bit until Tuesday.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.